In this project, we're going to create a variable that has a changing value based on whether or not a button is pressed, and then we're going to use the serial monitor that's built into the Let's Start Coding code editor to see the value of that variable and how it changes depending on how you press the button. If you haven't done the past project, LED flashlight, check that out so you can see this in action before we dig into the serial monitor and see what the computer sees. Above the void setup, we're going to create our variable. The first thing to decide is what type of variable it is. This is going to be an integer, so we type int. An integer variable just means it's a whole number with no decimals. Next, we name the variable. I named it press count because that's what this variable is keeping track of, how many times the button has been pressed. You can name a variable almost anything as long as it doesn't start with a number, but it's important to do something that you can remember, makes sense as you read your code, and you can type easily without errors. When you have more than one word making up your variable name like I do here, you can capitalize the first letter of the second word, and that's called camel case. That's an easy way to distinguish that there are two words within one variable name. Next, we'll use the equal sign and give the variable a starting value. So we have an integer variable named press count, and it has a starting value of 0. Within the void setup function, we want to set up the serial monitor so that MakerBoard can communicate back to the computer and we can see what's happening inside the code. Use the .begin function with an argument of 9600. Next, we'll use a pin mode function with the arguments 6 and input pullup to set up the button that's plugged into port 6. Within the void loop function, we have an if statement. The if statement has two key parts. Between the parentheses is a condition that is checked each time the if statement is run. The second part are the actions that run when the condition is true. So, if the digital read of port 6 is low, meaning the button is pressed, then the code between the curly braces will run. In this case, the code between the curly braces is press count plus plus, and that adds 1 to the value of the variable. So press count started at 0, as we see on line 3, and when press count plus plus runs, press count is now going to equal 1. There's a delay function with an argument of 250, which delays the code on this line for 250 milliseconds or 1/4 of a second, and that allows you to release your finger from the button before the if statement is checked again and accidentally counts your single button press as multiple presses. On line 16, we have another if statement. The condition here is checking the value of the variable. So is press count equal to 1? When we're checking if a variable is equal to a number, we use two equal signs here. So if that condition is true, then we want to serial.println the press count variable's value. So this serial.println function or println function means that we're going to show a value in the serial monitor and then move the cursor to the next line. So you'll have one line scrolling across your serial monitor. And we're going to use the press count variable value as our argument in this function. The else statement here will run only when the if statement conditional is false. So if press count is not equal to 1, then the actions of this if statement are skipped and the actions of the else statement run. You can see the function inside the else statement is serial.println press count. So we're going to print the value of press count regardless of its value. We always want to see on the serial monitor what is the value of press count every time the void loop runs. The next thing we have is press count equals 0. This command is going to take the value of press count and set it equal to 0 with the single equal sign. When the code reaches the end of the void loop, it will jump back up and check the first if statement condition again. If button 6 is pressed, then we'll increase press count by 1 again, delay 250 milliseconds, and then check the value of press count. If it's equal to 1, we'll display that on the serial monitor. Otherwise, we'll display whatever value press count is and reset it to 0. So let's see this in action. We'll upload the code to our maker board, and then we'll press the monitor button, and I'll scroll down. So you can see the value of press count is 0. I haven't pressed the button at all. Now I'm going to quickly press and release the button. Now the value of press count is 1 because the digital read of port 6 was low. Press count plus plus took press count from 0 to 1. And now we're inside the actions of this if statement on line 16. Press count equals 1, and we're printing that value. Now I'm going to quickly press it again, and you can see that press count is now equal to 0. So what happened was the digital read of port 6 was low. Press count plus plus made press count equal to 2. The if statement here said press count is not equal to 1, so skip those actions, run the else statement, and we serial printed press count and then set it equal to 0. If you were able to pause the serial monitor and go back up, you'd see a single print where press count equals 2. Press count does equal 2 for a very brief amount of time, one line of code, until the code resets it to 0. So if we hold down the button, we can see that the variable value is moving between 1 and 2. The way that works is that press count plus plus sets the variable equal to 1, it serial prints that value, and then the code reaches the end of the void loop and jumps back up and checks, is digital read of port 6 low? It's still low, so press count plus plus makes press count equal to 2, and that's going to mean this if statement is skipped. The else statement is run, so press count equals 2 and is displayed there, and then press count is set equal to 0 again. The void loop ends, jumps back up, and checks, is digital read of port 6 low? It is low, so press count plus plus makes press count equal to 1, and then this if statement condition is true, so again we're serial printing press count while it's equal to 1. The reason you don't see any zeros after you hold down the button is because there's no serial print function between setting the value equal to 0 and the value getting set to 1 in the first if statement. So if you had a serial print line function right here, and we uploaded that code and pressed the monitor button, we see that press count is equal to 0. A press and release makes it equal to 1. A press and release makes it equal to 0 again. And pressing and holding the button moves the variable value from 0 to 1 to 2 to 0. Now remember, we didn't change anything in the code. We just added one more print so you could see it print out the value of the variable when it's 0. So now you can see the way the code is moving the variable value through its 3 possible values, 0, 1, and 2.